Ladies and gentlemen, a very good day. I come to you today from downtown Georgetown, Guyana, and my heart is very heavy. It is heavy because I am looking at the unfolding of a situation in our, with regards to our prison situation in Guyana, and I want to arrogantly say that if the successive administrations had listened to me, Wendell Jeffrey, this would not likely have happened. And the reason I'm saying that is because ever since 2009, I have been proposing to the government. It was the last government, the PPP government, was in power when I came back to Guyana. And I was proposing to them a system that they have refused to implement. And the reason I'm saying that I'm arrogantly saying that if they had listened to me, this would not have happened is because they have not since set up the system. So nobody has set up the system. A system, a best practice system that we all know can work. It works in other countries. And so if it was me that they had a problem with, then they should have had somebody else who they trust and who they like and who acquiesces to their political ideology or whatever it is that they wanted. And then they should have had that person or those people put the system in place. But before I get further, I want to tell you who I am. My name is Wendell Jeffrey. I studied theology at the Caribbean Union College, now the University of the Southern Caribbean. I went on to Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama, where I finished my ministerial degree at the bachelor levels. And then I went on to Andrews University to pursue my studies at the master's level in theology. While I was in the United States there, I also founded what is now called the Practical Christianity Ministries, where we deal with ex-offenders and recovering addicts. And over the years, what I have done is that I have specialized in criminology, in understanding the criminal mind, why people commit crime, why they continue to commit crime, what can be done to reduce the likelihood of them committing more crimes, and that kind of thing. And I honestly, I think, again, I'm talking arrogantly and I'm talking passionately, I think that I'm a specialist in the area, if only because I've done this all across the world. I've gone to Africa, I've gone to Canada, I've been across the United States, across the Caribbean, and whenever I speak, people who know the field and people who themselves are in the field, they listen to me and they take my advice and my solutions that I offer. And so I'm very hurt that I'm a Guyanese who have lived overseas so many years, have come back to Guyana, and cannot get my brothers and sisters to understand the need to implement these concepts that have been implemented across the world, in many places with my help and my suggestions. And so I have traveled extensively, and what I do, I go to prisons, I talk with the personnel there in the countries, I meet with prisoners and inmates, and I conjure programs for them on how they could reduce the likelihood of them coming back to prison. I deal with their children and their spouses and their parents and so on. But somehow, and I'm trying to be very objective. In Guyana here, there is a political climate that obtains, and it doesn't matter whether it's the current administration or the previous administration. There seems to be the need for you to agree with them on everything before they can bring you into the inner circle. And I'm saying that because I've spoken to Mr. Barajak Dio, I've spoken to Mr. Clement Rohi, I spoke to Gail Teixeira, I spoke to Dr. Luncheon, I spoke to Prime Minister Samuel Hines, and I've had several meetings with these people. I've spoken to them several times. I gave them the document that outlines how they could implement a prisoner rehabilitation program in Guyana with costing. We have the land, we'll construct a building, we'll get folks to come in that will offer remedial services by way of academic tutelage. We will deal with life skills, we will deal with behavioral problems, anger management, and so on. We'll deal with vocational skills, we'll deal with spiritual formation, whether the person is Muslim, Hindu, Baha'i, Christian, what. We will get people from their faith, people of faiths that they lean to. We'll have these people who will come into the center and address them. It's a whole complete package. And you know what they told me? Well, the last government, they raised three things they told me that caused them not to go with the program. One, they told me it was too expensive. They told me it was too expensive. I think at the time we were looking at somewhere between $40 and $60 million to construct the building, pay the people who will teach the classes and so on. So they told me it was too high. Bear in mind, when I spoke with the government in 2009, 2010, the last administration, and they told me that the $60 million was too expensive, they were spending $60 million a month to keep people locked up. Okay? The plan I have, I will get to that just now. So, I spoke with all these people in the last administration. So they told me, one, it was too expensive. Number two, they said to me that if they give the monies to a Christian organization, because I'm a Christian, I'm a pastor, and they say that if you give the money to a Christian organization, then the other organizations, the other religious organizations will cry foul and all of them will come asking for money. I said, but that don't make sense, because I did not come to you as a Christian asking for the money. I came with a program and a plan. And so if the other organizations or the other religious bodies want to come and ask for money, then they must then come to you with a similar plan, with similar outcomes. Okay? So that's the second thing. And then what they didn't tell me off the records, what they didn't tell me on the records, but I found out off the records, is that they were concerned about my political affiliation. And so I addressed this with the last Prime Minister, Mr. Brother Hines, and I love him and respect him very dearly. I went to his office and we had the same discussion. And he was of the mindset that, yes, Pastor Jeffrey, you have to declare your political affiliation. And he said, but why do I have to? And he joked. He said that if you're not with me, and you're not with the PPP, then I need to call Mr. Granger. That's what he said. Mr. Granger was then the opposition leader. He jokingly said that he has to call Mr. Granger because then I'm a dangerous guy, because I didn't acquiesce to any political lineage back then. And so we joked. But we all agreed that the program was needed. And so, for what will or for woe, that never materialized. You know, of course, what people do sometimes is that they nitpick at your personal life, and they harp on this and that. And I'm not perfect, and so if they are waiting to hire a perfect person, or if they're waiting to implement the program until the person who spearheads it is perfect, then that's a high bar for them to raise, for them to use. But so we are. So. What we have here is, if they had implemented the prison rehabilitation program, and let me just differentiate here because I'm a pastor, and what we have happening is that we have people who say, well, we have prison ministry, people go into the prison and they preach. That is prison ministry. I do prison ministry. That is not prisoner rehabilitation. When you deal with prisoner rehabilitation, you have to deal with the criminogenic needs of the prisoner. What are the criminogenic needs of the prisoner? The prisoner has a need for housing. When he comes out of prison, he needs to go somewhere. Okay? And he needs to go somewhere that would not provide the catalyst for him to repeat the behaviors. So he needs housing. Right? In the program that I offer, we dealt with that. How to provide housing. So we'll have a transitional housing. Then the ex-offender needs vocational skills. Okay? They have to learn something so that when they come out from prison and they are finished with the transitional housing, they can be gainfully employed. So they need the vocational skill. They need academic tutelage. Many of our incarcerated guys, especially the guys for the blue-collar crime guys, they have an academic challenge. So a part of the rehabilitation process is to find out where they are academically and then bring in experts to take them to another level based on what level they're at. So if they couldn't spell rat, you get them spelling rat. If they finished school but didn't go on to college, you provide an environment for them to go on to college. That kind of system. We also have drug addiction. Many of the guys who are incarcerated are addicted to something, tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, crack cocaine. They have an addiction. So a part of the transitional rehabilitative process is to deal with the addictions that the guys have. Because a guy is in prison and doesn't have access to cocaine or doesn't have access to marijuana, doesn't mean that when you let him out that he has dealt with his addiction. That is why you need a rehabilitative process that makes sure that he is detoxified, that you take him through a formal process of detoxification, whether you're using, you have the Alcoholic Anonymous or the Narcotics Anonymous, but that is cognitive detoxification. You also need metabolic detoxification because the drug gets into your body, it gets into your pores and gets into your metabolism. And so you need a rehabilitative, a drug rehabilitation program that actually detoxifies the body. And a part of the rehabilitative process deals with that. And then we have the spiritual formation. What we have found in the criminologist arena, criminology arena, is that people who commit crime are not living by the dictates of the religion that they say they follow. So if I'm a Christian and I'm out there and I'm robbing, snatching lady purse, robbing a bank and so on, it means that I'm not living by the dictates of my religion. And the same thing with any other religion. So what we have found is that one of the necessary things in rehabilitation is to get people back to their religion of choice. And so the guys need to have access. If they are Muslims, we need imams who can come into the rehabilitation center. If they are Hindus, we need pandits who can come talk with them. If they are Christian, we need pastors. We need to get them back to where they need to be spiritually, or get them to where they need to be spiritually, so that that would further reduce the rate at which they commit crimes. All right? So that is the nutshell of what happens. But here what happens sometimes. When I talk like this, people feel, well, okay, we can get somebody else to do what Jeffrey is saying without using Jeffrey. Now, that is possible, but again, arrogantly speaking, it's very difficult because I don't do this for the money. And the people who I have with me, the people who I have trained, the people who will come on board once the program gets started, we're not in this for the money. And so when the government determines, well, look, let's find one of our friends or let's find one of our cronies, and we will ask them to replicate what Jeffrey has given us, because that's what they've begun to do now. I've given them my proposal, and they are dropping pieces of the proposal, hoping that people will implement it. Well, it's very difficult to do that, because it's my vision and my dream, and it's hard for you to take my material, which is unethical, by the way. It's hard for you to take that now and give it to a friend of yours or some social worker that you think might be able to do it and get them to replicate it. They can replicate it. They won't be able to do that. And so that is what has been happening. What I'm saying, though, is that you can't do this for the money. You have to do this for the passion. This is not a job for me. This is a vocation. This is a calling. And the people who will associate with me, I will make sure that they feel similarly about this. And so whether it's a formal process of hiring them or I know them already, it will have to be that they're getting involved with this because this is what they want to do. So I watched in horror last March as the prison burnt and some 18 guys were burnt to death. And I said to myself at that time, if only the administration had listened to me, because here what's happening. You have a situation where the administration thinks that they can do this at the governmental level using the law enforcement. You don't reduce crime by using law enforcement, not except you're going to begin to cut off the guy's hand and hang them again and demaim and disembody them somehow. You know, you're not going to reduce crime by doing that. And Guyana is proof that you can't reduce crime by using the law enforcement system. So what has been happening over the 9 years that I've been here, and I've been watching what's happening. The police force has increased in number. They've increased the numbers of the police force. They've increased the motorcycles. They've increased the vehicles. They've formed a SWAT unit. They bought water cannons. They built more rooms. at Camp Street and more room in Brickdam, and they've extended the prisons in Mazaruni, and they're extending the prison, and they're thinking that if we use law enforcement, and then if we increase the prison wardens, that we will curtail crime in Guyana. It would not happen like that. It does not happen like that. Because what you're doing is you're bottlenecking the system. This new administration came in, and kudos to them. You got a lot of robberies being solved and murders being solved, and they're catching all these wanted guys. And yes, good. But what you're doing is you're getting these guys and you're charging them and you're arresting them and you're sending them to all your 5 penal institutions, and you are bloating the institutions. And at the same time, you really don't have any program in place to reduce the rate at which these guys are coming back to prison. So your numbers keep ticking up because of you, and you're becoming more overcrowded, but you don't have anybody in the system who are working at reducing the criminal mentality of the people you're bringing into the system. So you understand what's happening there. You're bringing people into the system. Upwards of 70%, 60 or 70% of all the people in the Guyana prisons have been in prison before. So understand what I'm saying. If you reduce the rate at which the guys are coming back to the prison, you would reduce your overcrowding. It makes sense. It's logical. So what you do, in as much as you're focusing on catching the criminals and reducing the crime, you have to find a way to reduce the criminal mentality so the guys do not come back to prison. And that is where prisoner rehabilitation, which is the best practice all over the world, that is where prisoner rehabilitation comes into play. So watch what is happening. Last year, March, we had 18 dead because they didn't listen to me. Fast forward a year later, and we have lost an entire prison facility. Well, I passed there and I saw them cleaning up the place because I guess they're going to bring back some of the guys at the facilities that they still have erected there. So they're going to bring back some of the guys because you have structures, the concrete structures that were not damaged. They're going to bring the guys and put them there. I saw them getting ready for that. However, if you don't reduce the rate at which these guys are coming into prison, that's not going to help. So what we have now, we have a situation where, because of the problem we have, magistrates are now fanning out to where they're moving the guys, and they're going to now reduce the bail, or they're going to send home some of the guys on their own reconnaissance. Now, ladies and gentlemen, might I say, not pessimistically, but as a criminologist, that is the recipe for disaster. Let me explain why. When you reduce the bail for the guys, not because you think they deserve it, but because you are in crisis mode, what you do to the criminal mind is you send a signal to them. So the guys are saying, so now they're going to reduce our bail because they don't want us in here. So let's go commit more crimes because they have nowhere to put us. If you have a rehabilitation center, you deal with the criminal mind. The magistrates, with all due respect, the magistrates, the policemen, the prison officials are not trained to rehabilitate. The magistrate is trained to look at the law and commit a person. The police is trained to investigate a crime and to arrest and charge a person. The prison wardens are trained to keep whoever are sent to them locked up for as long as they were asked to be locked up. It takes criminologists and prison chaplains like myself to now come and create programs so that once the guys have gone through the system, they've been arrested, they've been charged, they've been sentenced, they've been jailed, then we come on now and we say to these guys, look, gentlemen, you have done what you've done, or you have been sentenced for doing what they said you did. We're not going to negotiate that at this point. How do you become a better person? So when I come in through the system, but I come in on behalf of the interest of the guys, and more particularly, we who come in as criminologists and prison chaplains, we come in on behalf of the betterment of the society. Because a lot of people feel, look, let's just lock them up. And we're going to lock them up and throw away the key. Well, statistically, 97% of everybody who you lock up is going to come back out at some point. 97. The only 3%, and that is statistically, the only 3% of what we call capital prisoners, men who are sentenced to hang or for death, or sentenced to death or sentenced to life. 3%. So no matter how severe the crime is, and no matter how many years the person gets, at some point they're going to come back out into society. So if you don't train them, if you don't get them academically equipped, if you don't get them vocationally trained, if you don't deal with their addiction, if you don't deal with their spiritual formation, if you don't deal with any of those things, when they come out, they are coming out just as broken as you thought they should be when they're locked up. And they're coming to marry your daughter. They're coming to live next to you. They're coming to break into your car and your house. They will get to you. So what we do is, while we come in through the system, we try to maintain a distance from the system and ourselves. So we are more empathetic and sympathetic to the needs of the inmates. We listen to them. And so they tell us, well, Pastor Jeffrey, I have my children out there, or I have my wife, or I have a girlfriend or something. We now take that information and we go out and we say, look, I've been meeting with your husband. He's in a remedial class. He's doing well. He's going to chapel. He's learning a skill. He's dealing with addiction. We talk to the children. We arrange meetings with the children and the inmates. And all of these things we do, not because we want to encourage crime, but because we know this is how you help the situation. So what we have happening in Guyana right now, we have the magistrates, and they're going to go out there and they're going to reduce bail money. And they're going to send some guys home. Guys who have been tainted with a criminal system that justifies their behavior. And these guys are not now going to go into any program like I am suggesting that they should go into. These guys are just going to go back out into society. Now, what are the likelihood of them remaining good civil citizens? It's very possible, but it's not probable. It's possible, but it's not probable. Because when you get into the criminal system, and we have proven this, you develop what they call a criminogenic mind. You develop a criminal mentality. You begin to think like a criminal. And so you went in there because you were arrested with smoking ganja. But you were in a cell with guys who break into cars. That's their specialty. They know how to disarm car alarm and stuff like that. Or you meet with guys who know how to pick locks. And so you learn these different trades. So once you went in for one thing, you come out as a specialist in a number of different areas. And if you are not formally transitioned back into the society, you have what we have happening in Guyana now, which is upwards of 60%. It's higher than that, because I read the 2010-2020 strategic plan. And in the plan, it's higher than that. But I'm being conservative by saying 60%. You have 60% of your guys who are currently in prison, who have been in prison before. Now understand what happens when you do a rehabilitation program. When you do a rehabilitation program, if you were to reduce, 60% is more than half your guys. So you got 2,500 guys locked up. Let's use half. Let's say you have 2,500 guys locked up. Let's say 1,000 of those guys went through a rehabilitation program, and 500 of them do not go back to prison. You understand what begins to happen? Because statistically, you have over 60% of your guys coming back to prison. If you reduce that in 3 to 5 years, over a 10-year period, you wouldn't have an overcrowding problem in Guyana with prisons. Just by reducing the rate of which people come to prison. Then here's what you do. You take the guys who have been rehabilitated and you use them as the catalyst to reduce the new kind of criminals. So once the guys have been rehabilitated, they came out of this rehabilitation program, they are now known, the community knows that they have gone through a rehabilitative process and so on, then you take them and you send them into your Tiger Bays and your Albois Towns and your Angus Alley and your East and West Ramveld, all your crime centers. You send these rehabilitative guys, these guys who have gone through a process, and they now meet with these young thugs who are coming up with their pants sagging and they got gun in the waist and stuff. You use these criminals who have gone through the system to now meet with these guys and say, look, gentlemen, there's a better way. And so you use us now who have been criminals who have changed our ways. You use us to go now and influence these now young guys. Okay, we go into the communities, we go into their community centers, we go to their schools, we go to the churches, and you now have a host of rehabilitated guys. 100 of us, 200 of us, 300, how much ever. And we are now going and we fanning out across the country. And we can now talk in ways that mommy can't talk to those guys. We can now talk in ways that daddy can't talk, except daddy is a criminal or mommy was a criminal. We can talk how the pastor can't talk. We can talk how the politicians can't talk. The politician has never been in prison. He's never been buggered. When the girls go to the female prison, they have to do oral sex. Sometimes the girl that they have to do oral sex on is menstruating. As ex-offenders, we can now talk of those kind of things. The food, you know, you're eating the food and there's raw droppings in the food. You're eating the food and there's cockroaches, old bread that the bakeries don't want, that they give into the prison. It's moldy bread. These kind of things. The food is stink. The fish is not properly seasoned. We can now talk like that because we've been to prison. So what we have happening now is that these guys don't have an outlet for that. So guys come out of prison and they make it think that though prison is nice. And prison is not nice. But nobody wants to admit that they were buggered in prison. Or there was somebody's girlfriend, or they had to perform oral sex in prison. Because there's not a control environment for that. But when once you go through a rehabilitative system, you go through this transitional system, you now can face the facts. And you can go to the schools and you can tell the young men and the young ladies what happened in prison, because there's a formal process for doing that. And that is the need. So again, let's go back to what we have happening in Guyana right now. The magistrates are out there and they're saying, reduce the bail, send the people home. And some people are saying, yeah, they should not have been locked up in the first place. And I agree with you. A lot of these guys who were locked up should not have been locked up in the first place. And what is happening in Guyana is a universal problem. It's the poor people who are mostly incarcerated, right? So we understand that. What I'm saying, though, is that even if it's your son or your neighbor or your daughter or your father or who, that person has been influenced by a system. They were locked up in a system that has governed their modus operandi. And what is good for the society, including you, is for them to go through a transitional system that best equips them to come back into society. And so that's the point I'm making. I'm not saying that they're guilty. I'm just saying that they need to go through a system, okay? And we have where the president has been releasing these young men for simple crimes and stuff like that. Again, when you just release those guys into the community and you don't set up a system to debrief them, you're really taking a chance. And so, finally, I want to touch on this topic. Most of your people who are incarcerated for the blue-collar crimes in this country are Afro-Guyanese. Most of them. And we could debate the reasons. We could look at academics as one. We could look at the financial situation. We could look at parenting and the family system. But that really isn't here or there. It behoves the administration. And I had this. One time I met Mr. Rohi at the Arthur Chung Convention Center. Of course, it wasn't named that at the time. I met him there and I said, Mr. Rohi, permission to speak to you frankly. I said, your government is an Indian government. Of course, he gave me permission to speak to him frankly. I used to be in the army, so I said to him permission to speak frankly, and that means that you could talk to your superiors in a frank way. And so he told me, go ahead and talk. And so I said to him, I said, your government is an Indian government. Wouldn't it be a nice thing for you, Mr. Rohi, who at the time was the Minister of Home Affairs? I said, wouldn't it be a good thing for you to institute this prisoner rehabilitation program for which most of the people who will benefit would be Afro-Guyanese. It gives credence to this notion that the PPP wants to transcend and wants to cross the racial barrier. But of course, Mr. Rowe, he brushed it aside. So did every one of the persons who I spoke to in the PPP, and it never became a reality. Now we have a new administration in, and for will or for woe, it's predominantly an Afro-Guyanese administration. And so I'm saying, you may not like Wendell Jeffrey, you may not like Pastor Wendell Jeffrey. I'm arrogant, I'm hot-headed, I'm not a political soup drinker, I'm not a crony, whatever. But I beg you, immediately introduce a prisoner rehabilitation program. Make it formal. This talk to where you don't have money, you can't sell that story anymore because nobody is going to buy it. Okay? Introduce a prisoner rehabilitation program and announce it on the television. Let mothers know, let fathers know, let parents know, let siblings know that Guyana has now have a prisoner rehabilitation program. It's a formal program, and this is how it works. When you are released from prison, or when you have a few years left before your release, you're going to be transitioned to a facility. That facility will deal with your drug addiction. It will deal with your vocational training. It will deal with your academic tutelage. It will deal with your spiritual formation. And for a period, it will provide housing for you that is safe and clean. Announce the program on television, through the new GPI, everywhere. Sell the story big. Let parents know, look, my child or my dad, let children know my parents will come out, they'll go somewhere, they'll be trained, they'll develop skills that will help them so they don't have to keep going back to prison all the time. Announce the program. Sell it. Sell it as an alternative to prison. Don't sell prison. Keep locking up guys who need to be locked up, Keep sending them to prison. But for Christ's sake, create an environment so that when they're done with prison, they could be trained, they could be equipped to come back into the society and to be productive citizens. Now, that's my take. And again, I'm speaking passionately. And again, I'm saying, for whatever reason, none of the political parties want to touch Pastor Jeffrey, and that is fine. I am just saying I don't have to do it, but it needs to be done. Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless Guyana, and let the discussion continue. Peace out.